welcome back to my channel True Crime and Trials, and today I will be going over the Anthony Pardon trial day 3. So the first witness is Arthur Hughes, who works at Columbus PD. He currently works in SWAT, but it was in the homicide division as a detective at the time of Rachel's murder. He arrived at the scene between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. There's a picture of where they found Rachel's car round the corner from her apartment. He said other officers were canvassing around that area to see if anybody saw anything or heard anything. He said he left the scene at around 1 a.m. Rachel's keys and car keys were never found. He didn't see any signs of forced entry, which corroborates with all the other witnesses that said there was no sign of forced entry. He saw the box that the knife was in on his last walk through at Rachel's apartment, but he didn't move anything to have a proper look inside, as the crime scene tech had already been through at that point. So, he just had a swift look round. He did actually see that box, but didn't have a look in it because I'm guessing he assumed that others had. He rang Rachel's bank, as obviously her debit card and credit cards were missing, and he asked for a statement of the transactions. So there's a photo of the bank statement and a photo of another bank statement, but a different format. And it shows there was a few transactions that had been denied, and on 29th of January there was a lot of cash withdrawals. The next photo is the dates and times of when the card was used, including addresses and names of the places where the card was used. So they went to all these stores and places where the card had been used to try and get hold of video surveillance. So now they start showing video surveillance pictures and footage that they were able to get from certain places. And the first place was a food mart, so they show photos outside of it, which was on the 28th of January at 9:43 p.m. Then they show Rachel's car coming into the parking lot at 9:44 p.m. and then it shows a man getting out of Rachel's car on the passenger side, which is said to be a man called Mr. Sleet. And then it shows him going inside the food mart, and then it shows a picture of him with a baseball cap on. The next is R&M carry out on the 28th of January, which was the next place her card was used, and it shows Rachel's car pulling in and the same man, Mr. Sleet, getting out of the passenger side, and it shows him walking out and going back to the car. And then they show a photo of inside the R&M carry out. It shows that Mr. Sleep went into the store to use the ATM. The next place is at 10:46 p.m. on the 28th of January at a Kroger checkout, and it shows Mr. Sleet at the checkout with a store assistant helping him buying cigarettes. Then at a Speedy Mart at 10:59 p.m. on the 28th of January, and it shows Mr. Sleet entering the store and then Mr. Sleet at the checkout buying beer. And one of the clerks at one of the stores knew who Mr. Sleet was and said he was a vagrant that was always out on the lot. Mr. Sleet was subsequently picked up and taken to police headquarters, and Arthur conducted an interview with him on the 6th of February 2018. And they now play that recording with Mr. Sleet, and he's a character, I'll say that much. And Arthur tells him that there was a woman that had been killed and he was in fact using her card, and he explains what happened, and he said some guy asked him to come over to the car. Oh no, Mr. Sleet saw Anthony in the car and asked him for some change, so Anthony asked him to come over to the car, which was Rachel's car, and Anthony asked Mr. Sleet to help him with a credit card and he would get him a room to stay in for the night. And he told Mr. Sleet he knew the PIN number. Anthony originally asked Mr. Sleet to withdraw $10,000, which Mr. Sleet said was a red flag for him at the time. He tried, but he obviously couldn't get the full $2,000. Anthony kept talking to Mr. Sleet into going and trying different places and trying the ATMs there. Mr. Sleet says they had spent about $400. Anthony told Mr. Sleet his name was Rob, and Mr. Sleet had never seen him before. And then once Mr. Sleet realises that they are using a dead woman's card, he starts to get really upset, and then realises that he could have been potentially killed. And then Mr. Sleet is shown some photographs, obviously, like a photo array of people to see if he recognises them. There's 6 photos in total, and he picks out the first picture after a while at looking at them, but he's not 100% certain. He said it just fits the profile from what he remembers, and then he picks number 6, so they're not really taking his word for it at this point. And Mr. Sleet agrees to give his DNA and is willing to help them in any way he can. So then we break for lunch, and after lunch, Anthony Pardon is not happy. He is not happy with his attorneys and how they are conducting themselves in this trial and what questions they're answering, and really attacking his attorneys and making it perfectly clear he doesn't really like them. And you know, the judge is like, well, you'll just have to make do, basically. We're not changing things around now. And you know, his attorneys are sat there like, well, what? I don't know what he expects them to do. I don't think they're being that bad. I think they're trying to defend a man who's quite obviously got an unsurmountable amount of evidence against him. So, you know, their only aim is to basically avoid the death penalty. I seriously do not know what he expects them to do. I don't think they're being that bad. They are working with what they have and what is against Anthony. So, I don't know. So the testimony continues, and at the time of Mr. Sleet's interview, they didn't have Anthony as a suspect. So the photo array they did was based on the description Mr. Sleet had given them, and obviously they go to their computer database and put in the descriptions, and the computer will come up with, you know, pictures of people that they have on the system that match that description. Then obviously when they did have Anthony as a suspect, they put another photo array together for him to see, but unfortunately they were unable to find him for him to positively identify Anthony. And then they learned that he'd actually passed away a few months later after that interview, which kind of made me sad because he was, you know, he was a character, and, you know. So Rachel's credit card had also been used after the 28th of January. It had been used on 29th of January at the Fine Food Mart. So now we're going through more surveillance footage, and it showing photos of the person who used the credit card, and he's actually using something to cover the lower portion of his face. Then at City Trends, and it shows 2 people entering, and one of them is Anthony and the other one is Deborah Pardon, which is Anthony's sister. It shows them leaving, and then at the checkout with his face concealed again. Then at a place called DSW, and it shows them entering, and then Debbie at the checkout, and then it shows Anthony coming up behind her. And then again at a Kroger at the checkout, which was Deborah. She has her face completely concealed as well. There was more transactions made on the 29th of January at a casino. And on the 30th of January, Rachel's card was also used at the Fine Food Mart again. Then they show another store on the 1st of February of Anthony using the ATM. His face is concealed yet again. Then a picture of when the debit card was used, and it's in the blue. The red at the top of this picture is Rachel's apartment. And they show the same again for the 29th of January, for the 30th of January, and for the 1st of February. And he is then asked about Mr. Sleet's DNA, and his DNA was not found at Rachel's apartment or on her. Jonathan Kennedy's DNA wasn't found on Rachel or any of the bindings either. And he also interviewed Sean Griggs, which I think was Rachel's ex-boyfriend, whose name is actually on Rachel's lease. And they found out that he wasn't actually in town at the time of the murder. And hi, sorry, it did it again. Driving me crazy. So, they show her a series of photographs from surveillance footage for identification purposes, and it shows the photographs that were shown to her and her signature on them, and she had identified herself in those photos. And she identified Anthony. Anthony had a girlfriend that lived in the same apartment complex as Rachel, and her name was Benita Anderson. Very strange that she's got the same surname. They show a picture of aerial view of the complex and where Rachel's apartment was and Benita's apartment. And from the rear of Benita's apartment, you can see directly into Rachel's back door. And a woman called Alison Gamble lived next door to Rachel and moved out of there at the end of 2017. So the cross-examination, basically it's the fact that the police department have nothing that connects Anthony with Rachel's car. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. Alison Gamble had spoke to Rachel a couple of times, but nothing major. So that was the end of day 3. Interesting day, especially with Anthony throwing a paddy, but we'll see over the next coming days. So until then, bye for now.